Have you ever stopped to think about the sheer power of faith, like really unwavering faith? Not just how it inspires one person, but how it can, shape whole communities and leave the spiritual mark for centuries? Well, today we're doing a deep dive into someone like that. The extraordinary life, the timeless legacy of Sant Tukaram. He was a prominent sadhu, that's a Hindu holy man, an ascetic, and his story is just packed with surprising facts, profound insights. It's really a journey for anyone curious about, well, spiritual paths or historical figures who actually changed the world around them. So our mission here is to unpack Sant Tukaram's story, all the layers, from his unique family roots, these incredible beliefs around his spiritual purpose, right up to what his devotion can tell you about things like destiny. We got some fascinating bits from history, spiritual texts, and trust us, this isn't just history class, it's alive, it still resonates.
Absolutely. And Tukaram's life, it's more than just history, isn't it? It's almost like a blueprint.
Yeah.
It shows how one person's lived devotion expressed through poetry people could relate to, through real compassion, could genuinely shift the spiritual landscape for, everyday people. He didn't just talk about faith. He lived a path that connected directly with their lives, showed that this deep spiritual connection, it wasn't just for like scholars or monks. It was accessible, profoundly accessible to everyone.
That's a great way to put it, a blueprint. Okay, so let's pull back the curtain. Meet the man. Who was Sant Tukaram? We're talking 16th century, okay? Born in this small village, Dehu. It's in Maharashtra, in India. And interestingly, his name itself kind of gives us a hint.
Yeah.
Apparently, Tuka means small or humble in Marathi. And it wasn't just a name, it really summed up his spirit. He was famous for this incredible humility. Always saw himself as the smallest, the least important in terms of virtue. Showed huge respect to everyone, especially other sadhus, other devotees. It wasn't for show. It was deep down.
Right. And that deep humility you mentioned, it wasn't separate from his faith. It was tied right into his immense devotion to Lord Panduranga, who's a beloved form of Vishnu. That combination, humility and devotion, that was the foundation, the bedrock of his path. And he didn't just think about it abstractly. He poured his heart out expressing it, mainly through these things called abhangs. They're short poems, devotional, often sung, very lyrical.
Abhangs.
Yeah, and they weren't like complicated theology. Simple, direct, just heartfelt expressions of love, of surrender. And that way of expressing it, so deep but so accessible, that's totally central to why he still matters today, why his story is still such a powerful beacon, centuries later.
Okay, so to really get to Karam's journey, we need to dig deeper, right? Into his family's faith, go back a few generations, because there's this extraordinary event that kind of set the whole thing in motion. It's about his great ancestral father, Viswambar Maharaj. Get this, he had this dream. Almost sounds like a myth, really. Lord Panduranga himself appears to Viswambar, tells him, hey, I'm lying out in your paddy field. Come get me.
Just like that, in a dream.
Just like that. And here's where it gets really tangible. Viswambar goes to his field, probably wondering, what was that dream? And to his absolute shock, he finds an idol.
No way.
Yes. And not just any idol. It's Vital, that's Lord Panduranga, who himself is Vishnu, in his consort Rukumai. And this isn't just a nice story. It's the actual idol, the one they still worship today in the Panduranga temple in Dehu. Imagine that. An idol found because of a dream, still venerated hundreds of years later. That connection is unbroken.
That's an incredible origin story for an idol, truly. But, for some people listening, a dream leading to finding an idol. That might sound a bit,
like just a dream, yeah.
Right. So how does something like that, so foundational, almost mythical, actually cement faith and shape a family's spiritual path for generations?
Well, what you often see, I think, is that families who are already so deeply devoted, whose whole lives are about worship, service, they naturally become sort of fertile ground for spiritual awakening. Sant Tukaram being born into this family, it doesn't seem like just chance, does it? More like a continuation, a spiritual destiny, building on generations of bhakti, that really profound, personal, active devotion. That background must have given him this deep sense of purpose right from the start.
That idea of spiritual destiny, fascinating. And his devotion, like you said, came out so strongly in his abhangs. But there's this other belief around them, too, a really profound one, about the sheer number of poems and why he wrote them. It's widely believed he wasn't just a great sadhu. He was actually a rebirth, a reincarnation of another giant in the bhakti tradition. Saint Namadev. Yes.
Exactly. So the story goes, Sant Namadev, centuries earlier, he set himself this massive task, composing abhangs. He apparently wrote 95 crore. Okay, context for everyone. 1 crore is 10 million. So 950 million abhangs.
Wow. That number is just staggering.
Isn't it? But he attained samadhi, that state of deep meditation, liberation, merging with the divine before he hit his target. The goal was 100 crore, 1 billion poems.
1 billion. Goodness.
So the belief is Tukaram was Namadev reincarnated, sent back specifically to finish the job, to write the remaining 5 crore, 50 million abhangs, bringing the total to that perfect 100 crore. I mean, what a spiritual collaboration across lifetimes, right? To finish this divine mission.
It really is a powerful idea in the bhakti tradition,
Yeah.
this like spiritual baton being passed down. And what's really striking, I find, is how close this is to what we think of as modern history.
Right. It's not ancient history.
Exactly. This isn't some myth from thousands of years ago. It's what, maybe 300 years back. Relatively speaking, that's quite recent.
Yeah.
It makes the whole thing feel so much more tangible, relatable. It shows these powerful spiritual traditions. They don't just vanish into old books. They keep evolving, keep showing up, inspiring people through actual living figures within recent memory. That makes it feel very real, very accessible for new generations.
Yeah.
It's not some dusty old legend. For many, it's a living spiritual reality.
That closeness in time really does make it feel immediate. Now, even with this amazing spiritual background, this destiny is on Tukaram's life, it wasn't easy. Not at all. It had some real hardships, significant trials, actually. For one thing, he lost his first wife very early. She died of fever. That must have been devastating. And then his second wife, Avali, well, she presented a very different kind of challenge, a really intense, really human challenge to his spiritual life.
Okay, how so?
Well, Avali, she believed in God generally, but she openly, almost fiercely hated Lord Panduranga.
I hated him.
Her reason was, honestly, it's pretty relatable. She felt Panduranga had basically spoiled Tukaram, filled him with so much bhakti, so much intense devotion, that he was completely neglecting his family duties, his responsibilities at home.
Ah, the classic tension. Spiritual calling versus worldly life.
Exactly. She complained bitterly. Apparently, she'd hide his musical instruments, sometimes even throw things at him, pour water on him if he was deep in meditation. It's such a raw human conflict, isn't it? Avali's frustration. Feeling this divine pull was taking her husband away from their everyday life. I imagine lots of families might struggle with something like that when someone is so dedicated to a cause.
That's spot on. It really brings up that core question, doesn't it? The tension between a spiritual path and worldly duties. It's a dilemma people still face. But Tukaram, despite her anger, her frustration, he never seemed to waver. He seemed to understand where she was coming from, her very human feelings. But instead of getting angry back or defensive, he'd just gently reassure her. Tell her that Panduranga actually held immense love and grace for their whole family, that the Lord was always acting in their best interest, even if it didn't look that way from, a day-to-day perspective.
Wow.
Yeah, it shows this incredible trust, this deep conviction he had, a different perspective, seeing divine care, even in her understandable frustration. That's a level of faith many of us would find hard to maintain, I think. He really lived his belief that the Lord provides.
It's amazing how he handled that. Such inner strength. And, despite all this friction, Avalali did stay. She was dutiful in her own way, kept the household running, supported him, even if sometimes, grudgingly. And it's worth remembering, too, Tukaram's family wasn't poor. They started out quite wealthy, landowners, merchants. But Tukaram himself was just so gentle, so generous, always helping anyone in need without even thinking about it. He just believed Lord Vittles would take care of him and his family, no matter what happened to their worldly stuff. He didn't want to miss a chance to help someone.
And that generosity, that compassion, it wasn't separate from his bhakti. It was a direct expression of it. He got that true devotion wasn't just chanting or writing poems. It was living a life of service, of kindness. He seemed to feel that material things were just tools, really, that real security came from divine grace. And this whole approach, his life, his words, it had a huge impact on the people around him. Through his abhangs, which were simple, remember, in their own language, Marathi, often set to music, he didn't just share his own feelings. He made the path of bhakti seem possible, appealing. He sparked this immense love, this devotion towards God, towards Lord Panduranga, in the most ordinary people, farmers, workers, housewives. His words just hit home, cut through life's complications straight to the heart, offered them a direct personal connection to the divine.
You mentioned his life being a living example of divine grace marked by miracles. Can you tell us about one of those public demonstrations? How did that grace show up in a way that the whole community could see, something that really cemented their faith?
Yes, absolutely. There's a very famous story, really impactful. It seems some critics, maybe scholars who are a bit jealous of his popularity, how his simple message attracted so many people.
No.
They conspired against him.
Okay.
They actually took his sacred abhangs, his tomes, and in this act of real disrespect, They threw the bundles into the Indrayani River
Oh,
and basically dared him, prove these are divine,
oh wow. Threw them in the river.
into the river. But Tukaram and his followers, they didn't react with anger. They prayed. They fasted for 13 days straight, right there by the riverbank. And then, miraculously, the bundles of poems floated back up to the surface, completely unharmed, perfectly dry,
13 days later, dry.
dry as a bone. And this wasn't just, a private sign for Tukaram. It was public, a huge reaffirmation for the whole community of his connection to the divine, the truth in his words. It really solidified people's belief in him, in his message, showed them the divine really did protect his sacred work.
That is an incredible story, so tangible. That would absolutely leave a mark on people's faith. But maybe the biggest, the most mind-blowing event, the real peak of Sant Tukaram's life, was his ascent, his journey to Sri Vaikuntham.
Vaikuntham, yeah, the supreme abode of Lord Vishnu.
Exactly. The legends, the belief, is that Lord Panduranga himself sent his own vehicle, the Garuda, that mythical eagle-like being Vishnu rides, sent it down, opened the doors, and allowed Tukaram to step inside with his physical body.
With his body, not just his soul.
With his earthly body. Think about that. Not just his spirit ascending after death, but his actual physical self taken up into this heavenly realm while still alive. It's the ultimate sign of divine favor, an unprecedented connection.
And what's so important here, the reason why this apparently happened, is the message it sent. It's a belief Lord Panduranga wanted to show everyone, especially the most ordinary people, that just by chanting the name of the Lord's name with true bhakti, with sincere, unwavering devotion, that alone can lead you straight to moksha.
Moksha liberation.
Liberation. Freedom from the whole cycle of birth and death. This wasn't a path only for the elite, the scholars, the ascetics. No, it was a message saying this ultimate freedom is accessible to everyone. It offered hope, a clear, simple path for anyone, no matter their background, their station in life. It showed that intense devotion in itself is a complete way to reach the goal.
So quite a journey we've taken through St. Tukaram's incredible life. From that ancestral dream, finding the idol, rooting his family in faith, to his name, Tuka, reflecting that deep humility. Then the whole fascinating belief about being Namade's rebirth, finishing that huge literary mission. We touched on the real human struggles too, like with his wife Avali, her very relatable frustrations. And then finally that astonishing journey to Sri Vaikuntham with his body. It really paints a picture of a life just soaked in devotion and the extraordinary things that can flow from that for the person and everyone around them.
It really does. And this deep dive into the story, it highlights how faith, sticking with it, perseverance, even really tough personal situations, how they can all weave together with a bigger spiritual purpose. It definitely raises a question, I think, for you listening now. What does it actually mean to live with that kind of unwavering belief, that deep bhakti, especially when you're facing challenges, family pressures, maybe skepticism from the world? And how might trying to embrace that kind of perspective, even a little bit, shape your own path, your own sense of purpose, even today, centuries later?
Yeah, and maybe consider this as you go about your day. If sincere devotion and something as simple as just remembering a divine name consistently, faithfully, if that can literally open the doors to ultimate liberation, then what seemingly small, consistent actions in your own life done with real sincerity, with faith, what profound power might they actually hold?